If you ever want to test how much dignity a man can lose in a single Tuesday, I'd recommend you try sitting through a suburban book club meeting where the topic of discussion isn't The Great Gatsby or Little Fires Everywhere, but whether handcrafted pottery communicates emotional honesty in marriage. I was the only man there, unless you count Larry, who wore Birkenstocks with socks and said MMM after every sentence like he was savoring a particularly poetic salad. Carl Morrison, was simply there because Martha insisted I'd been cooped up too long and needed culture. Culture, apparently, meant watching Denise from down the street cry over a cracked mug she'd made that looked just like their first vacation rental. Everyone nodded solemnly like they were standing over a casket. I excused myself halfway through a demonstration on the healing power of intentional clay work, under the guise of needing to check on the lawn sprinklers. In truth, I went home, sat in the garage, and stared at my 15-year-old power drill like it owed me answers. I wasn't sad. Not really. Just aware. Aware that something had shifted in my house. Not exploded, nothing dramatic like that. More like a piece of furniture you bump into and realize has been moved slightly to the left. Martha had been off for a while, sure. Her laughter was too polite. Her "have a good day" landed with all the sincerity of a paper towel commercial. But she still made coffee. Still folded the laundry. Still reminded me to take my vitamin D. All the ingredients of a functioning marriage, just, well, without the actual meal. It wasn't until Thursday that the crack in the ceramic finally widened. It started with curtains. I came home from work, a charming blend of copy editing insurance claims and contemplating the futility of existence, and found the living room curtains had been replaced. Not washed, not repositioned. Entirely different. Deep blue velvet, where once there had been cheery tan with little stitch leaves. The new ones were heavy, theatrical, like we were prepping to stage Macbeth in the living room. Do we live in a castle now? I asked as I stepped in, dropping my keys on the table that was still too wobbly despite my many heroic efforts with a hex key. Martha was on the couch, legs tucked under her like a yogi about to deliver bad news in a gentle tone. I just thought we needed something more dramatic. Are we trying to make the neighbors think we're hiding a secret chamber? I teased. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't be silly. And that was that. Except it wasn't. Because once you spot a change, you start spotting all the others. The new books on the shelf that didn't have broken spines, books she never mentioned reading. The music playing in the kitchen while she cooked, jazzy, wandering stuff with no lyrics, like the soundtrack of someone trying to pretend they were fine. And the biggest one, she no longer locked the bathroom door. Now, I don't need bathroom privacy secrets in my life. But when someone suddenly starts doing something differently and deliberately, it gets the brain gears going. So I started looking. Not snooping. Investigating. Observing. I'm a grown man. I wasn't going to dig through drawers like a raccoon in a crime procedural. But I kept my eyes open. Then came the brochure. Not the kind you find in waiting rooms or stuffed in junk mail. This was thick, glossy, folded like origami and tucked into a stack of old property tax statements. I was looking for a pen that worked and found that instead. On the front was a photo of 3 people dressed like they were about to sell me enlightenment. Flowing linen shirts, gentle smiles, hands gently overlapping in some kind of spiritual finger pyramid. The touch within, a weekend journey into energetic intimacy. I don't know what those words mean together. Separately, yes. Together, they sound like something that gets advertised at 2 a.m. between reruns of Frasier. I opened it, because of course I did. There was a full schedule. Group breathing exercises. Eye-gazing connection spirals. Trust movement. Partnered silent mirroring. And a workshop called Unbinding Shame Through Sacred Touch, which, frankly, gave me flashbacks to middle school gym class when Tim Lavers tried to hug me after dodgeball. And there, in the margin, written in Martha's handwriting, pack loose clothes. No underwire. With a smiley face. I sat down on the floor. This is how I found out, in case you're wondering. Not from texts. Not from lipstick on a collar or a friend's whispered warning. No, my marriage began to collapse under the spiritual weight of intentional pelvic openness and a $399 weekend retreat just outside Santa Fe. Still, I didn't confront her. Not right away. There's a weird sort of dignity in letting people finish writing their own confession without knowing you've already read the rough draft. Instead, I asked questions. So, you ever think about going to one of those weird retreats? You know, the ones with dream catchers and goats. She looked up from her Sudoku and blinked. That's oddly specific. Just curious. Seemed like the kind of thing someone who replaces perfectly fine curtains might get into. She smiled, The way a magician does right before pulling a rabbit out of your wallet. You're in a strange mood today. Yes, I've decided to become mysterious. Keeps things spicy. The day she left, she packed light. Said she was visiting a friend from college. Didn't say who. Didn't mention the retreat. Just left a note on the fridge that read, "Back Monday. Don't forget the recycling," with a heart drawn like a second grader learning cursive. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask anything. But I did take Monday off. And when she came back, her hair a little wavier than usual, wearing shoes I'd never seen before, she walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and asked if I'd eaten the leftover chicken. I stared at her. Was it the velvet curtains? I asked. She froze. What? The thing that broke it. Broke us. Was it the curtains? She laughed, genuinely, and it made me want to crawl into a cave and stay there for the next 5 decades. You're ridiculous. Thank you, I said. I try. She didn't answer. Just stood there, fridge still open, as if it held some answer in the produce drawer. It didn't. Not unless she'd left her conscience in with the carrots. The thing about Martha is, she's not the kind of person who makes mistakes. Not the regular kind, anyway. She makes those highly curated, self-justified, 5-bullet-pointed, spreadsheet-supported decisions that she later refers to as necessary pivots. That's her term. She used it once to explain why she'd switched to almond milk for 2 months before declaring it too emotionally neutral. So when she made her little weekend trip to wherever it was that taught intimacy through guided toe pressure, or whatever, I knew it wasn't spontaneous. Martha doesn't do spontaneous. She schedules spontaneity like it's a dental cleaning. On Monday, after she unpacked and spent an aggressive amount of time refolding scarves that didn't look like they had ever been worn, I started connecting the dots. And to be clear, I didn't want to connect them. I was perfectly content to live in mild denial, like a man who knows his favorite pizza place fails every health inspection but keeps going because the sauce is just that good. But then there was the pin. I was looking for a functioning pin in our drawer of abandoned office supplies, also known as the third drawer of doom. In it lived expired batteries, 20 Evan paper clips doing absolutely nothing, and a bottle of correction fluid that had gone full fossil. That's where I found it. A slick, metallic pin engraved with the words "The Touch Within," practitioner level. Now, unless Martha had suddenly become a spiritual chiropractor over the weekend, we had a problem. The cap was chewed. Martha doesn't chew things. She says oral fixation is a primitive coping mechanism for emotional dissonance. Her words. So either someone else chewed the cap, possibly while demonstrating mindful longing, or this pin had spent time with someone else entirely. The ink was blue. We only ever buy black pens. Why? Because Martha said blue ink lacks conviction. This wasn't a clue. This was a neon sign blinking wrong house, wrong marriage, wrong woman. Now, in any other situation, a man might panic, or cry, or confront. But I, Carl Morrison, took a slightly different approach. I called Greg. Greg is my cousin. He's also my emergency contact for everything except medical forms, because he once listed occasional bleeding from the soul as a pre-existing condition. He works in IT, which is just a fancy way of saying he knows how to find things on the internet and explain router settings in a tone that makes you feel dumb, but not too dumb. I told Greg I needed to find out what Martha was doing, but I didn't want to violate her privacy in a way that was, actionable in court. He suggested I start by checking the family laptop. Now, the family laptop is really Martha's laptop. I use it sometimes, but only with a kind of formal permission that involves me announcing what I'm doing and then waiting for her to say, fine, like I'm borrowing state secrets. But today, Martha was at her weekly community art therapy class, because painting vague circles while listening to soft jazz apparently soothes her inner narrative, and I had 2 hours of unsupervised access. I opened it like it was rigged to explode. First stop, her emails. I didn't open any. I just looked at the subject lines like I was trying to decode the behavior of a mildly dangerous bird. Lots of reminder, your spot is reserved, and aligning our chakras with movement. Boring. Suspiciously boring. Then I saw a folder marked personal resources, which, in any other context, might have meant tax forms or a recipe for quinoa salad. This one had PDFs. I opened one called Soul Partner Retreat, Feedback Reflections. It was formatted like a job evaluation. There were questions like, what did you discover about your capacity for receiving? And how did your partner support your energetic release? If that isn't just a spiritual way of saying I cheated on my husband while pretending to do yoga, I don't know what is. Then I found the photos. Martha must have assumed the cloud would never betray her. But Greg taught me about cloud syncing, and here we were. Dozens of thumbnails, all with names like session1.jpg and grounding_exercise_4.png. And then one just labeled E. I clicked it. There was Martha, barefoot, wearing the kind of tunic that suggests either a spiritual awakening or an overambitious arts festival. She was sitting across from a man blonde, unreasonably tanned, and smiling like someone who's never heard the phrase tax deductible. Their hands were pressed together, eyes locked, lips very, very close. In the next picture, they weren't close anymore. They were, well, acquainted. Now, I'm not a jealous man. I don't throw fits or punch walls. I just sat there, clicking through each pixelated betrayal, mentally taking inventory of all the things I could now stop pretending to enjoy. Incense, sage bundles, small wooden bowls that hold precisely nothing. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was stupid. So stupid. This wasn't a scandal. This wasn't a tragic unraveling. This was a poorly disguised adult field trip, wrapped in buzzwords and quinoa snacks. My wife had emotionally defected with a man who probably described himself as a sensual empath and said things like the universe guided me to your aura. After an hour of this, I did the only thing I could do. I printed the pin photo. Just the pin. Not the man. Not the touching. Just that ridiculous engraved pin. I put it on the fridge. Martha noticed it that evening. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up and studying it like I'd just introduced a new form of bacteria to the house. I shrugged. Found it in the drawer. Didn't know we were collecting things from retreats now. She didn't answer. Just stared at the pen, then at me, then back at the pen. Like maybe, if she concentrated hard enough, it would become a normal pen again. She placed it on the counter. I should probably return that. To the emotional gift shop? She didn't respond. She never does when sarcasm gets too close to the truth. So now we sit in the same house, breathing the same air, sharing the same toothpaste, while a very expensive pen silently judges us from the corner of the counter. It's the most honest thing in this marriage right now. Martha was standing in front of the closet, holding a coat hanger like it had personally wronged her. I leaned on the doorframe, sipping from the same chipped mug I'd used since college, mostly because it had survived Martha's various kitchen overhauls and now felt like a protest artifact. "What exactly are you looking for?" I asked, because apparently, that's what I do now. Ask questions I already know will get vague, emotionally evasive responses followed by mild irritation and something about energy. "I thought I had a linen shawl in here," she said without turning. "The one with the lavender trim." "Right. The ceremonial one," I said. "Reserved for high-stakes spiritual emergencies and tapas restaurants with outdoor seating." She gave me the look. The one she used to reserve for slow grocery baggers and people who said, "Espresso." I was starting to collect those looks like souvenirs. "So, Martha," I said, walking into the room like I wasn't staging a one-man intervention. "You've been doing some deep spiritual, what's the word? Vibrating? No, wait, vibing. That's the one." She put the hanger down with a kind of exaggerated calm that always meant she was about to deliver a lecture she thought would leave me emotionally humbled and reconsidering my life choices. "Carl, I really don't know what's going on with you lately, but I think you're projecting." She said it like she was diagnosing a rash. "Oh, good," I said. "We've reached the phase of the marriage where you speak in therapy terms you don't actually understand. Do I get a chart, or are we just winging it?" "You're making jokes," she said, narrowing her eyes. "That usually means you're avoiding something." "Yes," I nodded. "I'm avoiding the part where I ask how long you've been using the phrase energetic mirror bonding as code for extracurricular face-holding with strangers." Her face froze. Not dramatically, she wasn't that kind of person. More like a small system error. A flicker of, "Oh, what are you talking about?" I took a sip of coffee and sat on the edge of the bed like it was my own personal truth commission. "I found your practitioner-level pin. I also found your reflections. And let me say, the part about releasing inner blocks through synchronized breath work was deeply moving. Really made me want to invest in a yoga mat and cry into a clay bowl." She blinked. "That's private," she said. "That's not a denial," I replied. "Just pointing that out." "You went through my things?" "Nope," I said. "Your things went through the cloud." "Greg says hello, by the way." She sat down across from me, like this was going to be a board meeting, and she just realized the intern knew about the embezzling. "So what is this, Carl?" she asked, crossing her arms. "A trap." "No. A trap involves cheese and a spring mechanism. This is more of a conversation with evidence." I didn't do anything wrong, she said. Not in the way you're implying. In the way I'm implying? Oh, please, Martha. If I implied any less, I'd be mime acting this confrontation in the driveway. She started doing that thing she does when she's flustered, rearranging inanimate objects that don't need rearranging. She reached for a decorative bowl full of acorns from a fall centerpiece she'd refused to take down since November and began shifting them around like they were clues in a murder case. You and I haven't connected in a long time, she said finally. Okay. So let's define connect, just for the sake of transparency. Because based on your little weekend retreat, it seems like connection now involves something called guided vulnerability massage, which I'm sure is very legal in New Mexico. Her lips pressed together like she was physically holding back a monologue about how I never take things seriously. She was right, of course. I don't. Because the second you take this kind of thing seriously, you're halfway to writing passive-aggressive poetry in a notebook and crying in the garage over IKEA assembly instructions. I didn't sleep with him, she said, finally. And for a brief moment, I almost respected the commitment to the half-truth. Oh, good, I said. Because nothing says marital loyalty like not sleeping with the man who guided you through your tension release spiral, while rubbing essential oils into your intention chakra. That's not what happened. Then what happened, Martha? I stood up. Walk me through it. Enlighten me. Use whatever language makes you feel least responsible. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. The acorns were getting dangerously organized. I needed something you weren't giving me. Let me guess. Spiritual alignment? A safe emotional space? Someone who owns more than one linen tunic. She stood up now too, arms still crossed, but now she was the one leaning against the wall. A standoff. We were 2 feet apart and 7 years into a silent collapse. I just wanted to feel seen. Seen. I laughed. Martha, you're the most visible person I know. You give TED Talks on dinner napkins. You make lists for lists. You have mood boards for soups. That's not fair. Neither is your new friendship bracelet with the guy whose job title sounds like a scam email. There was a silence after that. The kind that hangs in the air like you're both waiting for someone else to walk into the room and referee. But there wasn't anyone else. Just us. 2 people in a house full of decorative bowls and self-help books and one really incriminating pen. You don't even want to try to fix this, do you? She asked quietly. Oh, I do want to fix this, I said. I want to fix it by removing the part of the marriage where you get to redefine betrayal using PowerPoint slides and incense. She turned toward the window like that would somehow offer a better view of this conversation. It didn't. You're cruel sometimes. No. I'm just finally being honest in your language. Which is saying something, considering yours comes with footnotes and feelings charts. She didn't respond. Just left the room. No storming. No tears. She walked out like a manager leaving a meeting she'd already marked as non-actionable in her calendar. I stood there alone for a while. I looked down at the bedspread she'd chosen, a muted beige thing with little embroidered lines that she claimed represented balance. It looked like a parking lot. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly where we are. Tuesday morning, I woke up to the sound of Martha mediating with her new online yoga group. They chant phrases like, I am one with breath, and let the light guide the truth, all while lying on a carpet that's mostly symbolic at this point. The irony is that I actually miss the days when her form of spiritual expression was just labeling the spice jars and color-coding the fridge. But I wasn't bitter. No, bitterness is for people who expected something better. I was simply in a phase I now call recreational accountability. That's the polite term. The more honest one would be strategic inconvenience. Either way, Martha was about to experience a new kind of personal growth. I started with the Wi-Fi. For years, she insisted we name our home network Mindful Space. Something about inviting calm energy. So I renamed it Martha is not at a book club. Subtle enough that strangers wouldn't notice, but clear enough to make her inhale through her nose like she was about to file a complaint with the manager of the universe. Of course, she changed it back by lunchtime. But that wasn't the point. The point was establishing a tone. Next came the meditation room. Or, as I used to call it, the guest bedroom that no longer hosts guests because it's full of floor pillows and abstract interpretations of emotions painted by people named Sage. Martha treated that room like a shrine. You weren't allowed to speak above a whisper in there, and the salt lamp had its own power strip. So I moved in. I brought in my old recliner from the basement, the one she claimed looked like it voted third party, and plopped it right in the center of the room. I added a folding table, a desk lamp shaped like a hammer, and my college-era lava lamp for ambience. Then I brought my laptop and started using the space for what I called loud reflection, which mostly meant watching old stand-up comedy specials with the volume up. When she walked in that afternoon holding a tray of herbal tea and saw me in full recline watching a documentary about vending machines, she blinked twice and said, "What are you doing in here?" "Reclaiming sacred space," I said without looking away from the screen. "I need a sanctuary for my inner child." That earned me a full 10 seconds of silence before she turned and left. Progress. Next up was her planner. Now, I wouldn't usually mess with someone's planner, but Martha's wasn't a normal planner. It was a bound command center for the month ahead, filled with page-long to-do lists, color-coded tabs, and post-its reminding her to breathe with gratitude. So I added a few things. Nothing cruel, just small adjustments. On Thursday, I added 9 a.m., acknowledge that Carl still exists. Friday, 11:30 a.m., apologize for pretending emotional clarity is a personality. Saturday, 4 p.m., call mom. Explain that Carl didn't actually lose his sense of humor, just his patience. She found the changes pretty quickly and started using her digital calendar again. But for those 2 days, it was worth it. I walked around the house like a man who'd finally figured out which wire was the toaster and which one was the blender. But my favorite piece of revenge? That came in the form of the support group. See, Martha had recently joined a local workshop called Rebuilding Self with Feminine Intuition, run by a woman named Kendra who wore embroidered shawls and once told me my presence interrupted the energy flow. Kendra also ran an email newsletter. So I signed up with Martha's email, using our shared Amazon account's login info. Apparently, she never changed the password. Then I forwarded the newsletter to all her contacts. Yes, all. Not just her yoga crew and her essential oils lady. No, I included the HOE board, her boss at the foundation where she worked, and, just for balance, her cousin Denise, who once told me I look like I drink milk out of a bowl. You're welcome, Denise. The newsletter wasn't scandalous, but it was exactly the kind of self-important rambling that made Martha feel like she was participating in something deeply revolutionary, even though most of it was about unlocking feminine posture through pelvic honesty. Her phone buzzed all day. She walked around the house muttering things like, "That's not even my primary account," and "Why would Alan from payroll need to see that?" Later that evening, she sat across from me on the couch and asked, "Are you trying to make me look ridiculous?" "No," I said. "I think you're doing fine on your own. I'm just boosting the signal." She stood, arms crossed, and said, "You're not handling this in a mature way." Mature? I laughed. "Martha, you staged a weekend theater production where you rebranded emotional betrayal as personal enlightenment. Forgive me if I don't respond with a journal entry and a scented candle." She didn't speak after that. She just left the room like a CEO whose quarterly meeting didn't go as planned. By the end of the week, the house had taken on a new rhythm. Martha spent more time outdoors, pretending the patio was an emotional retreat. I spent more time in the kitchen, reorganizing her labeled spice jars by alphabetical chaos. She tried to retreat into silence. I responded by humming catchy jingles during her sacred journaling hour. She made herbal tinctures. I brewed coffee strong enough to cancel them out. This wasn't war. This was balance. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles in when two people have absolutely nothing left to fake. It's not peaceful. It's not tense. It's just blank. Like the house itself was trying not to take sides. Martha and I had reached what she probably would have called a transitional phase, which is her way of describing anything she can't control with a planner or a subscription box. She moved around the house like a polite tenant, occasionally remembering that we used to share things like a bed, a car, and a wedding. I, on the other hand, had officially entered my strategic honesty era, which mostly consisted of answering her rhetorical questions with facts and watching her blink like I'd slapped her with a research paper. Sunday morning, she tried to lighten the mood by asking if I wanted to go to the community garden to plant something symbolic. I asked if resentment came in seeds. That was the last attempt at cheerful banter that week. So when she sat me down in the living room on Thursday evening, I knew we'd reached the dreaded talk. Not the original talk where people admit things. No, this was the "so what do we do now" talk, where adults sit in ergonomic chairs and pretend they're emotionally evolved enough to solve betrayal like it's a plumbing issue. She sat on the edge of the couch, wearing one of her cotton balance dresses that looked like a tent had mated with a tablecloth. I sat on the armrest of my chair like a man about to get sentenced for crimes he didn't commit, but definitely thought about. "We need to talk," she said, as if I'd wandered into the room by accident and wasn't very aware of where this was headed. Is this about the chair I moved into your salt lamp room or the newsletter I signed you up for? Her jaw tensed slightly, but she pushed past it. She was trying to be composed. Or whatever her version of composed was these days, stern and emotionally confusing. This isn't working, she said. I'm shocked, I replied. Truly. I thought we were just about to renew our vows under a tarp of essential oils and disappointment. She ignored that and kept going. I think we both know this marriage is no longer fulfilling either of us. Well, I said, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I might have said I was fine with mediocrity. But lately, I've grown fond of the truth. And chairs with back support. She sighed. It was the kind of sigh she gave when she realized Trader Joe's was out of her favorite tea, and she had to settle for soothing blend instead. Carl, can you be serious for once? I've been serious this entire time. You just didn't like the version of me that doesn't nod during your spiritual recaps. She blinked slowly, like she was recalibrating. I know I made mistakes, she said. Plural. Good. We're off to an honest start. But I did those things because I felt invisible. No, Martha, I interrupted. You did those things because you wanted to. You wanted someone to validate your emotional scrapbook. You wanted your feelings endorsed like a check. She looked away, possibly at the plant in the corner, which I hadn't watered in a week. It was the only living thing in this house more withered than our marriage. Are you saying this is all my fault? I'm saying this is your choice. And choices come with outcomes. You didn't stumble into intimacy on accident. You filled out a registration form. She looked like she was about to cry, and I wish I could say I cared in that moment. But mostly, I was just tired. Not angry. Not sad. Just tired of rearranging the truth to make it look polite. So what do you want, Carl? She asked, after 30 seconds of staring at nothing. I stood up. Not dramatically, just enough to feel like I had my spine back. I want a house that doesn't smell like regret and lavender. I want conversations that don't feel like TED Talks. I want to remember what it's like to laugh at something without having to ask if it's on brand with our emotional values. I want out, Martha. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She wasn't used to hearing me say definitive things without a sarcastic follow-up. But this time, there wasn't one. She sat still, staring at the coffee table like the remote might have the answer. I guess I always thought we'd fix this, she said quietly. Fix what? You redesigned the marriage and forgot to include me in the blueprint. She rubbed her hand against the side of her leg like she was trying to ground herself. Do you think we'll be okay? I took a breath and let it out slowly, because apparently that's something I learned from her meditation podcasts, against my will. You'll be fine. You'll journal through it. You'll paint it into an abstract shape and say it represents transformation. Me? I'm gonna go buy a couch without checking if it matches the rug. She smiled at that. A small, resigned smile. It wasn't sad. It wasn't happy. It was the face of someone who just got called out on a group project and decided to take the B-. I'll stay with my sister for a while, she said after a pause. Just until we figure things out legally. Take your time, I said. I'm not in a rush to divide the salt lamps. She stood up, adjusted her dress, and nodded. And that was it. No hug. No handshake. No dramatic exit music. Just two people who built something, watched it bend into something else, and finally agreed to stop pretending it was still a house. Martha left on a Monday morning, which I appreciated. Mondays already feel like emotional spam. It seemed fitting that her departure would pair well with an inbox full of promotional emails and a garbage truck that never arrives when you need it to. She took 3 suitcases and an indoor plant that had been dying slowly since spring, though she insisted it was in dormancy. She didn't say goodbye in the traditional way. She said, I'll let you know about the attorney I spoke to. He specializes in conflict-conscious separation. Then she pulled the door closed like she was sealing a meditation capsule. And just like that, I was alone. Not in the sad violin, meaningful stare out the window sort of way. I mean alone as in no more unsolicited herbal teas, no more linen wall hangings meant to evoke something abstract like intentional stillness, and no more circles of women on Zoom describing themselves as aloe for the soul. The silence wasn't healing. It was just quiet, which, for the first time in months, actually felt like a win. That afternoon, I walked through the house taking inventory. Not of belongings. Of freedom. The guest room, formerly known as the inner journey space, was now mine again. I dragged out the floor pillows and stashed them in the garage next to the failed compost bin and the stationery bike we both pretended to like for 3 weeks. I brought in a desk, a real chair, and my old stereo. Not the digital one. The kind with knobs. It made a satisfying click when I turned it on, and for the first time in a long while, I listened to music that didn't include wind chimes or a didgeridoo. The kitchen was next. I gathered every item that had the word cleanse on the label and put it in a box. This included 24 mason jars, 3 glass pitchers, a bamboo strainer, and a stack of coasters that said, "Inhale peace, exhale fear." I dropped the box at the community center donation bin. Maybe someone else needed to inhale peace. I was fine with just air. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No late-night journaling sessions echoing from the other room. No essential oil diffuser misting eucalyptus into my face like it was trying to baptize me against my will. Just a bed, a man, and the complete absence of unearned self-awareness. In the days that followed, I noticed something interesting. People started checking in. First came Greg, who texted, "Is the linen empire crumbling?" followed by a link to a second-hand furniture site that offered faintly used energy stools. Then Denise, yes, that Denise, called to say she'd never liked how Martha spoke to the barista. That's how people process breakups, by the way. Not with insight, but with a pile of small, petty grievances they save like receipts. Even my neighbor, Bill, who once told me he meditates by mowing the lawn slowly, popped his head over the fence to say, "Hey, sorry to hear. You doing okay?" Define okay. I said. "You still got your grill?" "I do." "Then you're fine." And weirdly, he was right. I was fine. Not glowing. Not thriving. Just fine. And for a guy who used to spend half his energy trying to understand the difference between holding space and emotional detachment, that felt like progress. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday. They were bound in one of those office supply folders with the clear plastic front, like it was a school report. I signed them at the kitchen table with a pen that didn't have a spiritual slogan on it. I mailed them back the same day. No note. No final thoughts. Just the required signature and enough postage. 1 week later, Martha sent me a message. Not a phone call. A text. Very on brand. "I hope you're finding what you need, Carl." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I'd finally figured out that not every statement deserves a sequel. Instead, I went out and bought a new coffee maker. One with no compostable filters or eco-friendly certifications. Just a good, reliable drip. I set it up in the kitchen and made a cup. No ceremonial mug. No sage blessing. Just coffee. Then I sat down and opened a notebook. Not to journal. Not to process. Just to write something that wasn't about healing or loss or trying to turn disappointment into a TED Talk. I wrote, "Marriage is like assembling IKEA furniture. At first, you think you're missing a piece. Then you realize the instructions were vague. Then you sit on it wrong and everything collapses." And then I laughed. Because honestly, it wasn't that far off. A few weeks passed. I started rearranging the house, not out of emotional necessity, but because I actually wanted to. I moved the couch, replaced the rug, repainted the hallway in a shade I didn't need to pretend was inspired by desert minimalism. I even bought a print of a giant fish just because it made me laugh. No one had to approve it. No one had to find its deeper commentary on solitude. It was just a fish. Eventually, I stopped telling people I was recently divorced. Not because I was hiding it. Just because it stopped being the most interesting thing about me. People say you grow from things like this. That you become stronger, wiser, more emotionally aware. I don't know. I think I just got tired of compromising with someone who treated intimacy like a group project. What I do know is this. The next time someone asks if I'm into mindful communication, I'll say yes. Because now, I'm actually listening. Just not to the nonsense. And that's it. No grand finale. No slow fade into a life of artisanal candles and forgiveness rituals. Just a man, a quiet house, and the luxury of being done with someone else's journey. Let me know if you want another story. Carl's not the only one with baggage around here. Subscribe to the channel